Hello and welcome. This is Yon Cheku with NSM TV, bringing you the latest news. Tensions in the Middle East are directly affecting global energy markets, driving up oil and fuel prices. In this context, Canada and its allies are considering concrete steps to restore freedom of navigation in one of the world's most important maritime corridors. Canada has expressed its readiness to contribute to international efforts to restore safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz, a key artery for global oil transport that is currently facing a de facto blockade due to the war in Iran. In a joint statement published on Thursday, signed by Canada, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Japan, the countries called on Iran to cease threats, the laying of mines, as well as drone and missile attacks that hinder the free movement of commercial vessels. The Strait of Hormuz is a strategic choke point through which around 1/5 of the world's oil supply passes. Since the start of the conflict, most maritime transport in the area has been disrupted, leading to direct increases in energy costs worldwide. According to the latest data, the average fuel price has reached 170 cents per liter, about 20 cents higher compared to the same period last year. The statement was released shortly after a meeting between Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi and U.S. President Donald Trump. The latter stressed that Japan heavily depends on oil passing through the strait, calling the situation a strong reason for intervention. Canada's Foreign Minister, Anita Anand, condemned the situation, describing it as a weaponization of international shipping, and emphasized that vessels from all countries have the right to navigate freely. Iran's new leadership has hardened its tone following recent strikes on senior security officials. Amid rising tensions, Tehran signals a tougher approach toward both internal and external opponents. Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, has declared that security must be denied to all enemies of the country, following the killing of a senior intelligence official in Tehran. The statement comes days after Iran's intelligence minister, Esmail Khatib, was killed in an Israeli strike carried out late Tuesday night. The attack occurred just one day after another key security figure, Ali Larijani, was also eliminated. In his reaction, Khamenei described Khatib as a dedicated and quiet veteran, adding that his absence must be compensated through increased efforts by intelligence structures. Since the beginning of the conflict with Israel and the United States at the end of February, Iran has lost dozens of senior officials and military commanders, severely impacting its leadership structures. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, suggested that the supreme leader himself may have suffered minor injuries during Israeli strikes in Tehran, but has since recovered. Analysts assess that the latest statements indicate an escalation in rhetoric and an effort to maintain control and public morale at a time when the country faces continuous blows at the highest levels of security. The European Union summit in Brussels has faced a major political deadlock due to Hungary's veto on aid to Ukraine. At the same time, European leaders have expressed concern over escalating tensions in the Middle East. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has blocked the approval of a financial aid package for Ukraine during the EU Leaders' Summit in Brussels, also preventing the signing of a joint statement. Despite efforts by German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and other European leaders, Budapest was not persuaded to lift its veto on the multi-billion euro aid for Kyiv. Talks continued late into the evening, but ended without a concrete agreement. Orban has linked lifting the veto to the resumption of Hungary's Russian oil supplies via the Druzhba pipeline, arguing that the shortage threatens the economy and the well-being of Hungarian citizens. Quote, "We are ready to support Ukraine when we receive our oil," end quote, he said, emphasizing that supplies have been blocked by European partners themselves. European diplomats criticized this stance, noting that Hungary had previously approved the roughly €90 billion aid plan at the December 2025 summit. Meanwhile, Merz publicly stressed the importance of credibility and respecting agreements within the European Union. Alongside political tensions in Europe, EU leaders also discussed concerned developments in the Middle East. Attacks on gas facilities in Iran and Qatar have raised fears of further escalation. At the end of the summit, member states called for an end to attacks on energy and water infrastructure, protection of civilians, and full respecting for international law. These calls followed the Israeli strike on the South Pars gas field, while Iran responded by hitting liquefied gas facilities in Qatar, further increasing tensions in an already unstable region. The start of the Persian New Year has been marked by a significant escalation in the conflict between Israel and Iran. Airstrikes over Tehran and developments in the Strait of Hormuz are raising concerns about a broader regional and global crisis. The Persian New Year has been marked by a wave of bombings carried out by Israel over the Iranian capital, Tehran. According to the Israeli military, the targets were infrastructure linked to the Iranian government, prompting the city's air defense systems to activate immediately. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stated that the situation in the Middle East has fundamentally changed, emphasizing that Israel is stronger while Iran is weaker than before. He added that cooperation with the United States is at an unprecedented level, also mentioning his relationship with President Donald Trump. Netanyahu said the conflict will last as long as necessary, but left open the possibility that it could end sooner than expected. According to him, after about 20 days of clashes, Iran currently lacks the capacity to enrich uranium or produce ballistic missiles. Parallel to military developments, international media report that the Islamic Republic is considering imposing a transit tax on ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz. This proposal would include fees on oil, gas, and even food supply shipments. Experts warn that such a measure could have major consequences for global energy and maritime markets, turning the strait into an even more sensitive strategic point. If implemented, the tax would represent an economic pressure tool by Tehran amid high tensions with the West. In this context, some analysts warn that the situation could also affect U.S. geopolitical calculations, particularly efforts to guarantee freedom of navigation in this vital trade corridor. Similar to developments in the Red Sea, where maritime traffic has significantly declined due to attack risks, the Strait of Hormuz is becoming another flashpoint with direct impact on the global economy. Reports from U.S. media suggest that the United States is considering possible military scenarios against Iran. The focus is on a pressure strategy to ensure the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, a key hub for global energy trade. U.S. President Donald Trump is considering the possibility of blocking or taking control of Iran's Karg Island, according to American media reports, including Axios. The island lies about 30 kilometers off the Iranian coast and handles the majority of the country's oil exports, making it a highly strategic point for both Iran's economy and global energy markets. According to cited sources, such an operation would aim to pressure Tehran into reopening the Strait of Hormuz, which remains one of the world's main arteries for oil and gas transport. Reports emphasize that any potential military intervention would first require weakening Iran's capabilities in the area before considering action on the ground. A source familiar with discussions at the White House was quoted as saying that about 1 month would be needed to carry out strikes that would further weaken Iran's forces, creating the condition for a possible operation and its use in negotiations. A senior U.S. administration official stressed that despite the scenarios under discussion, no final decision has yet been made. He added that the main objective remains ensuring the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, and that all options, including naval and coastal operations, remain on the table. The Turkish president has reacted strongly to the tense situation in the Middle East. His statements come at a time when conflict in the region is escalating and political rhetoric is intensifying. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan stated that Israel will face consequences for its actions in the Middle East in remarks made Friday morning after Eid al-Fitr prayers. Speaking from his hometown, Erdogan first delivered holiday greetings, emphasizing the importance of unity, solidarity, and coexistence among Muslim communities and Turkish citizens. He then turned to regional developments, describing the situation in the Middle East as tense and fragile. The Turkish president strongly criticized Israel's actions, stressing that they will not go unanswered. Quote, "I have no doubt that Israel will face the price for these developments," Erdogan said, further escalating diplomatic rhetoric between the sides. His statements come in a broader context of regional tensions, where military and political clashes have involved several international actors and affected overall stability. The Turkish president's remarks are expected to influence diplomatic dynamics in the region at a time when the international community is calling for de-escalation and avoidance of further conflict. Tensions between Israel and Iran continue to affect both military and diplomatic fronts. A U.S. intervention has pushed the sides toward a temporary step to avoid further escalation. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stated that his country will temporarily suspend attacks on gas fields in Iran following a request by U.S. President Donald Trump. At a press conference, Netanyahu said the decision aims to prevent further escalation in the Middle East, adding that Israel does not intend to expand the war beyond its current objectives. He also rejected claims that Israel has drawn the United States into direct involvement in the conflict. However, the situation on the ground remains tense, with reports of explosions in various areas, including Jerusalem and Tehran. Iranian authorities have warned of a strong response if attacks on their infrastructure continue. At the same time, several Gulf countries, including the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain, have reported missile and drone attacks. The UAE and Bahrain have accused Iran, further heightening regional tensions. According to human rights organizations, the death toll in Iran since the start of the conflict at the end of February has surpassed 3,000, reflecting the scale of the humanitarian crisis. The impact of the conflict is also being felt in global energy markets. Gas prices have also risen in Europe and the United Kingdom following attacks on the Ras Laffan energy complex in Qatar. Qatar's Prime Minister described this as a dangerous escalation, warning of further consequences for regional stability. Iran has suffered another major loss within its military structures at the peak of regional tensions. The death of one of the key voices of the Revolutionary Guard is expected to affect Tehran's communication and strategy during the conflict. Major General Ali Mohammed Naini, spokesperson for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, has been killed, according to Iranian state media. The news was confirmed by state broadcaster IRIB, which reported his death in the early morning hours. Iranian authorities described the incident as a result of a U.S. Zionist terrorist attack, stating that Naini died in the early hours of Friday, on the last day of the holy month of Ramadan. Ali Mohammed Naini had over 4 decades of service in the Islamic Revolution and had served as the IRGC spokesperson since July 2024. He was considered a key figure in communicating Tehran's official positions during the escalation of the conflict. In recent weeks, Naini had been among the main voices conveying that Iran is ready to endure a prolonged war despite the damage sustained. He stressed that the country's missile and drone capabilities remain operational and capable of retaliation. He had also warned that any attack on Iranian energy infrastructure or civilian targets would trigger a direct response against U.S. and Israeli interests in the region. In addition to his role as spokesperson, Naini was closely associated with Imam Hossein University in Tehran, the IRGC's academic institution, where officers are trained in military strategy and ideological doctrine. U.S. authorities have launched a broad operation against cyber networks linked to Iran. The focus is on platforms used for propaganda, threats, and attacks against opponents of the regime. The U.S. Department of Justice has announced the seizure of several websites that, according to authorities, were used by Iran for psychological operations and propaganda distribution. Investigations show that these platforms were operated by Iran's Ministry of Intelligence and Security and were used to publish data stolen during cyber attacks, including those targeting Albania. One of the seized websites was directly linked to attacks on Albanian institutions, while its content was described by U.S. authorities as state-directed Iranian propaganda. The well-known group, Homeland Justice, was also mentioned in this context. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi warned that terrorist propaganda online can turn into real-world violence, while FBI Director Kash Patel stressed that authorities will pursue anyone involved in these attacks and threats. According to the Department of Justice, the seized websites published names, photos, and sensitive data of around 190 individuals linked to the Israeli government, accompanied by threats and calls for violence. These platforms were also used to intimidate journalists, dissidents, and members of the Iranian diaspora who have criticized the regime, aiming to suppress independent reporting and create a climate of fear. The rise in fuel prices has forced the government in Tirana to intervene with immediate measures to stabilize the market. Authorities aim to curb abuses and ease the burden on citizens through tax cuts and price controls. The government has decided to reinstate the Transparency Board following the increase in fuel prices, which have reached 219 lek per liter. The decision was announced by Economy Minister Delina Ibrahimai. According to her, the decision came after a lengthy meeting at the Prime Minister's office, attended by the Prime Minister and ministers responsible for finance and energy, to analyze the situation created by recent developments and the impact of international tensions on energy markets. One of the main measures is a 20% reduction in the fuel excise tax. Currently set at 40 lek per liter, it is expected to drop to 32 lek, affecting the final price for consumers. In addition, clear limits will be set on profit margins. For wholesale trade, the margin will be at 3 lek per liter, while for retail sales it will be 12 lek per liter. According to the government, this measure aims to ensure transparency and prevent market abuse. The Transparency Board will convene whenever there are significant changes in international market prices, setting price caps above which fuel trading will not be allowed. Authorities warn that any violations of these price limits by traders will be punished with strict measures, including license suspension. Through these interventions, the government aims to keep fuel prices under control and protect consumers during a period marked by instability in international energy markets. This is all we have prepared for you today. Thank you for joining us.